But let's talk about the mob moving from statue to statue. Cecil Rhodes in Oxford is one they want to top, a big demonstration there yesterday. Robert Milligan, a slaver in the Docklands in East London, his statue was actually removed by the local council. There's a whole long hit list of statues. It's all part of a commission for diversity in the public realm set up by Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, to review statues and landmarks across the capital to ensure they reflect the capital's diversity, which of course they won't, because the capital has only been diverse in about the last 40, 50 years, and statues largely been put up before then. But 130 councils around the country are also reviewing this. We are going to be seeing an awful lot of changes, aren't we? But should we be doing that? And what difference does it make if a statue is to somebody who we don't share the same moral values with now? Let's talk to Chris Newton, who's a historian of war and strategy and a former defence policy advisor to the Conservative Party. Good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Should we be removing statues to people who did bad things in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I do have concerns about this idea that we can simply erase bits of history. As you said in your programme earlier, I mean, it doesn't change the current problems, it doesn't change what happened in the past, and actually removing history reduces people's chances of learning from it, and the good and the bad bits. I see it as akin to like ripping pages out of a history book. You can't understand the latest chapter in our book and how we've changed as a society, how we progressed, etc., etc. If you're not, if you're not able to access the early chapters, and the early chapters aren't represented in some form.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's such a good way of putting it, because this is sort of a year zero erasing of our past, Orwellian. But, we had always been at war with Oceania. We were, they weren't, whichever country, whichever landmass it was that they were at war with, then they weren't, and then they were again. And everyone has to just pretend in doublethink that this is always the case. We know that our past is not covered entirely with glory, but we also know that things have changed. It seems to me that just because a statue is up to somebody who did horrible things in the past, and there's no doubt at all. I mean, Edward Colston, who was a slave trader, Robert Milligan, and Cecil Rhodes in Oxford. But we aren't putting up statues to these people now saying, oh, we celebrate these wonderful men for the wonderful things we're doing. They were put up in the past at a time when people had different moral values. Should we ever try to judge the past by our moral values now?
I think I think that's problematic. I mean, one of the things that I'm trained as a historian, and one of the things that I'm taught is that we shouldn't judge the past by our current standards because they have very different value systems in the past, and if we are going to go down this road of taking down statues and so forth, then we'll end up with absolutely nobody, because virtually no one from past eras hold 21st century values and 21st
well, indeed,
century
virtually no one from 20 years ago holds a lot of the values that people have now.
True.
And the views on trans people, gay marriage, women's rights. I mean, a lot of these views have changed at incredibly rapid pace. People can argue for good or for ill, but they have changed rapidly. But in a way, also celebrating our present now. Part of that is about how much the world has moved on. When we just a few years ago were marking 100 years of women, not all women, some women getting the vote in 1918, we were marking the fact that what a strange world it is that only 100 years ago women were not thought, they were thought effectively to be children, and therefore weren't able to have the vote. When President Obama was elected in the United States, there were black men and women there at his inauguration who in their youth were not able to vote, and yet there was the first black president. Sort of knowing the past and acknowledging the past allows you to celebrate progress in the present.
Yeah, yes, I completely agree with that, and it goes back to my earlier point about you can't understand the story unless you learn about the attitudes of the past, and also in other countries, they also hold physical reminders of grim periods of their history. So you have, Auschwitz, still remains, and you think of the excellent work of the Holocaust Education Trust in educating school children from this country about the Holocaust. I've got a bit of Berlin Wall in my house.
I do as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have this. We do hold reminders of bad aspects of history as well.
Can we also just talk about, look, there's a lot of view that particularly white people should be ashamed of Britain's past in slavery, despite the fact, of course, it was the Britain who ended slavery. No other empire ever moved to do that. But people were just viewed as the spoils of war, and that's why they were taken to slavery for millennia. But also this idea that we should be ashamed of everything we've done in our empire, when actually if you look at the empires of many other countries, even at the same time, they treated the people far worse. We did some horrible crimes against humanity, no doubt at all about that. But the vast majority of people in Britain now, of the white population, didn't benefit from slavery in the way that we're told that we did. I mean, I don't think my Irish immigrant grandfather or my char lady cleaner grandmother, I don't think they were enjoying the spoils of the riches that were made by slave owners centuries ago. Vast majority of white people in this country, yes, they weren't slaves, and yes, of course, that is better. They were doing better than people who were stolen from West Africa and sent to work on the plantations in America. That goes without saying. But they were working 14-hour days, 6 days a week down the pit or in the mills or in the fields. They were not living the life of Riley at this time. Ordinary white people were having a pretty rotten time as well.
Yes, and and that was what Marx was writing about. Marx and Engels were writing about in the 19th century. So yes, I really dislike any form of simplistic, history or reducing history down to a particular kind of theme or something. History is extremely complex. There's different viewpoints. There were different classes of people in different societies. And one of the things about removing parts of history as well, and having this commission dictating, this diversity commission dictating kind of our history, is that we do run the risk of reducing and simplifying history, where we should understand its complexities and the nuances.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Chris Newman, historian of war and strategy, former defence policy advisor to the Conservative Party.